here. So if everyone wants to enable your microphones for the attendance and then turn them off afterwards, and make sure you engage them when you are speaking. Mr. Clerk, do you want to take the roll and we'll start our meeting?
Sure, Chair. Chair Evan Shanley.
Present.
Vice Chair Alex Marzalkowski.
Present.
Floor Leader John Edwards. Representative Jean-Philippe Barros. Whip Michael Chippendale.
Present.
Attorney Ryan Holt for Attorney General Peter Nerona.
Present.
Mr. Christopher Gilrain.
Present.
Dr. Cedric Preby.
Present.
Ms. Michelle Cinco Grano.
Present.
Mr. Tim Wilkerson.
Present.
Mr. John Simmons.
Present.
Okay, Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Welcome to the Rhode Island Online Data Transparency and Privacy Protection Commission. We started meeting back in December of 2018 and met about a dozen times until the pandemic started, and we have not met since I believe the end of February or beginning of March of last year. We did have some unfinished business. We had 3 bills that we were looking at in between the last meeting and now. We have put together a draft committee report which has been distributed to all of the members, and today one of the things we're going to be doing is going over the draft report and providing the opportunity for committee members to offer any feedback or insights on the proposed draft report. We're also going to look at the Virginia Data Protection Act, or Virginia Consumer Data Protection Act. That's a bill that passed between our last meeting and now in Virginia that a few advocates have asked us to consider. So I'll be looking for feedback from the commission members as to whether this is something that they think is a worthy substitute for any of the language that we're looking at, or any of the bills that we're looking at, or if there's language from this bill that can be pulled. Just general feedback and impressions from that piece of legislation. And then, assuming that there are no major issues with the commission report, the goal would be to set another meeting and distribute a revised final commission report for us to then meet and vote on to whether or not to approve. So the first thing that I'd like to do is going back to a review of the draft report. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but just to summarize what we've done in the approximately almost 3 years now since the commission came to life. The 3 bills that we've been focusing on are the so-called Right to Know bill, which would give consumers the right to know what information was collected, stored, and sold by internet service providers and commercial websites. The second bill was a student privacy draft bill, which was based on model legislation utilized in other states. And the third bill we looked at was the so-called data broker bill, which looked at a way to regulate, control, and rein in data brokers, who are the people that collect, store, and sell your personal information online. And any of them that were based in Rhode Island or Rhode Island could assert jurisdiction over, the data broker bill would seek to regulate. That bill was based on legislation that had passed in Vermont, and I believe it was Mr. Wilkerson that originally brought it to our attention at one of the early meetings of the commission. So the report summarizes everything that we looked at over the past 3 years, the testimony that we've received, and makes recommendations with respect to those 3 bills at this time. And the current recommendation is to recommend passage of the Right to Know bill as submitted and drafted last year, and again this year. I believe the bill this year is House Bill 5959, and that's also been distributed to commission members. The other 2 bills that we've been spending time on, the student privacy draft bill and the data broker draft bill are bills that, at least at this time, the inclination is to hold those bills for further study because of the fact that it seems like they may duplicate or interfere with existing state and federal law and some concerns that have been raised in that area. The other big picture item that's happened between the last commission meeting and now is that the House now has a committee that is dedicated to looking at technology and internet privacy, chaired by Representative Ruggiero. So some of what we do today here, this work can be continued in that committee in the coming years, but I felt like this committee put a lot of time and effort and met a lot in order to just look at all three of these bills, that we deserve the opportunity to come back together, discuss everything, and get a consensus on what the committee's report was going to be and what the recommendations were going to be moving forward. So with that said, I'd like to open it up for the committee members to offer insights, suggestions, comments, anything you want to say about the draft report that we have available. And if things are not at the tip of your tongue right now, we can have an open line of email. I just ask that any emails you send regarding changes or potential changes to the report of the commission, copy all of the members of the commission so that everybody has the opportunity to offer a little bit of feedback on it. So does anybody want to start us off with a discussion on the committee report? Could be a very brief meeting. I don't know if that's an incentive or a disincentive.
I'll start it off, Chair, if that's okay.
Of course, Michelle.
So thanks again for giving us the opportunity to meet. I appreciate that you sent this out to us. I think that we put in so much work on the right to know bill. Of course, we'd love to see federal legislation pass instead of state by state. But if we had to pass a state bill, the right to know legislation, HB 5959, is what we would like to see move forward. I feel that it was very thoughtful. We've put in a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of effort as a group, and I think that it's a good piece of legislation to pass out of our committee and our commission.
Excellent. Thank you, Michelle. And for those of you that don't know, Michelle, do you want to just indicate what organization you're advocating on behalf of or representing here on the commission?
Sure. Michelle Cinco Grano from Verizon. I am sitting in the chair for the ISPs. And
you've always been the first one at every in-person meeting. But
John Simmons beat me today.
He beat you
Chair,
today. I was just about to get you to that Mr. Simmons did beat you today. Thank you, Michelle. Anybody else on the commission have any insights on the report that they would like to share? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, I had asked this earlier, and I think Mr. Holt had provided some information as to the enforceability of it. Still a concern. It says it enforceable and to what extent it might be enforceable. I think the Attorney General has provided some. It might just be worth it in the report itself, is to say that this would be enforceable in Rhode Island.
Okay. I don't know if Mr. Holt's prepared to comment on that today. Mr. Holt, are you?
Mr. Chairman, hi. No, not at this moment, but happy to take a closer look with that and to chat with you, John, Mr. Simmons, as well as some others on that. But I know, John, thinking back to last winter, I know we'd had that conversation, so I'll certainly take that back.
Thank you. The other would be, I guess, is your concept, Mr. Chairman, to sort of from today, we have one more meeting of the committee itself and committee acts. Is there another hearing that you might consider on the 5959 for one final session to allow folks who may not have had the chance or are aware of the fact that this committee is going onward? Is it of some value to have one more time to hear from the industry folks for their comments before any final action?
Yeah, I don't mind doing that. The thought was that this bill would have been placed into the House Internet Privacy Commission or committee, but unfortunately it didn't get put in that committee for consideration. So either to ask for another hearing in that committee or next year when it's resubmitted to have it be assigned to that committee so that people that are following that committee and on the committee have a chance to offer any insights, and there can be another set of eyes on it. So whether that happens over the next couple of months, or really at this point I guess it's less than a month, or next year, I do envision that happening. And if you had to ask me what I think is most likely, I think it's most likely that it would have that hearing at some point early next year.
I was not sure, Mr. Chairman, whether it's going to be this year action or would it be postponed or changed for next year. I just thought sometimes for some of us who recommended or suggested that this committee stay and do its work and conclude prior to the session, I still think would be of some value to have a hearing, allow folks to do it before we make our recommendation. Hopefully that will have some influence upon the other committee.
So would your recommendation be then that we have another meeting not just to ratify the proposed legislation, but for this commission to consider and hear testimony from the public and receive written testimony?
From this committee, yes. One more time, allow people to come and talk, so one cannot say I didn't have an opportunity to speak before this committee made a recommendation as a particular legislative action.
So you want to spend more time together, John? Is that what this is?
Well, since I was first on this session today and haven't been around for over a year, and I know you've missed me, but so with that in mind, I just thought for my purposes anyway, since I have not had the contact over the last year with folks about where this stands in their mind, at least for my purposes. But again, if the other folks don't want to come and talk to us, then that's fine too.
No, that makes sense to me. And if there's a consensus on doing that from the rest of the commission members, then I would certainly support that. Representative Barros is here. Could you mark his presence, please?
Mr. Chairman, I think I would agree with Mr. Simmons. I think it's certainly important to hear from the public one more time, especially now that we're sent the recently passed Virginia law, so that way we can just take a look at how the landscape may have changed since the last time we've been together. That way we're getting the most current picture. So I think that does. I would have to agree with Mr. Simmons.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, this is Tim Wilkerson from the New England Cable and Telecommunications Association. I just want to build off of what Mr. Holt just said. I think it's also important to note that, as we all know, the composition of Congress has changed and the Federal Trade Commission has changed. I want to read 3 highlights from a recent hearing with Federal Trade Commission in front of a Senate Commerce Committee. 1, the FTC should act and protect consumers' digital privacy should Congress fail to move forward with a national law shielding those rights. 2, Congress should reinforce the FTC's ability to provide consumers with monetary relief to the Supreme Court, roll back that authority with an anticipated ruling, and which I think occurred. And 3, Congress should grant more resources to the agency for enforcement, given a sharp increase in merger filings. I think that's important to note that that's the landscape that's much different than the last time we spoke. Number 1, and then I'll go back to what Ms. Gutierrez said. That we also, and I'm sorry, I butchered your name, Michelle. I can see you smiling. We generally support the draft plan, and our position is the same on the 3 bills. Right to know, we put a heck of a lot of effort and time in this committee. I think that's a noble end product. And also, again, we will continue to push that the Vermont bill be adopted for data brokers and that the student privacy bill be the model legislation that's passed in so many states. So with that, I'll say once again, as I said before you joined, Mr. Chairman, it's great to see everybody again. And NECTA would be more than happy to participate in 2 hearings or 2 additional meeting in a hearing.
Very good. Anybody else on the committee have any insights or comments? Okay, the next, Mr. Gilrain, is your microphone on?
Yes, thanks. I just wanted to say thank you to the chair for assisting me in joining this committee. I'm taking over for my predecessor, Christina Fisher, on behalf of TechNet. So just wanted to thank the chairman for bringing me on board and for Bob for helping get that all squared away. Just in the interest of additional things that may have changed in the year since this commission was put together. At the congressional level, TechNet has always supported a national standard, and it appears that we may be closer than ever before. TechNet specifically highlighted a proposal from Congresswoman Susan Del Bene of Washington as a promising start to this conversation in Congress. So just another thing that has changed landscape-wise. Again, thank you.
Well, thanks for being here. So the other item on our agenda was the Virginia Consumer Data Protection Act. And nobody on the commission reached out to me to ask me to consider it, but I did receive some correspondence from people representing industries saying that this was a model bill worthy of consideration. I took a look at it, and it seemed to do a lot more and get into a lot more detailed issues than the so-called the Right to Know Act did. And my thought was that this might be something that be more onerous for business and less helpful for the consumer, less easy to navigate. But that's just my initial reading of it. So I was hoping that some of the more enlightened and educated members of the commission might have a take on it, either today, or if not today, then in correspondence afterwards or at subsequent meetings. But I at the very least wanted to put it on everyone's radar as a subject for consideration and discussion.
Mr. Chairman, it's Tim Wilkerson again. I would just say that the neighboring state of Connecticut has tried to pass the Virginia Act, Virginia law, and it's proven to be much more difficult than, and as one can imagine, than what I think the sponsor originally imagined. And I think that is pretty indicative of the experience. I think once we start going into these bills that are so complex and have such wide-reaching impact, that they are not easy to pass in the same exact form and fashion as Virginia, for instance. And I think that interoperability between states, I think, is key to be able to pass something that everybody can live with. So I think your instincts are correct that we should slow walk that legislation at most. It's something that maybe we can talk about in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Wilkerson. Anybody else on the committee have any insights or reactions to the Virginia Consumer Data Protection Act?
Chair, if I may, it's Michelle.
Michelle, of course, go ahead.
So I believe that when we took a look at this legislation, there may be a fiscal impact due to some of the data impact assessments that need to be performed. And also, this legislation doesn't go into effect until January 1st, 2023. There are quite a few compliance issues that I think multiple businesses need to work through before this gets enacted. So just if we could be cautious and I'd prefer to take a deeper look at this rather than kind of just push something forward.
Sounds good. Looks like Tim had to board his flight. We lost him.
Mr. Chairman, I just moved to my phone.
Oh, okay. Well, I give you credit for participating in the meeting in the airport and doing a great job.
But I am going to board, so if you call on me and I do not speak, just give me a moment.
We won't do that to you. Does anybody else on the committee have anything to say about the draft report or the Virginia Consumer Data Protection Act?
Mr. Chair, if I may?
Yes.
Dr. Freeby. Sorry I wasn't able to come off mute earlier, but I wanted to just raise a request related to the draft report. I looked through my notes, wasn't able to find the most current draft of that. If that could be redistributed, I'd appreciate. And then same true with the most current version of the right to know draft legislation.
Sure, we can do that. That's easy. For your reference, it's House Bill 5959 this year, but we, I believe, Mr. Miller distributed a copy of it via email today.
So very good. I'll keep an eye out for that.
Excellent.
On the version that the last version I saw of the draft right to know bill, what raised a concern from my perspective as a CIO of a health system here at Rhode Island lifespan, the notion of an exclusion of covered entities and business associates who are subject to HIPAA. I thought I had seen that in an earlier version, but I didn't see it in the version that I last saw. I just wanted to raise that concern.
Okay. That's something that we can take a look at for the draft bill that's included in the committee's report and recommendations. Does anybody else have a concern with the HIPAA exclusion? I think there may have been a discussion that obviously HIPAA would apply, but we didn't want to make it so that any entity that had to comply with HIPAA but also did something else in its line of business didn't have to comply in that capacity. So we can take a look.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Sorry, I was waving my hand. Yeah, I think we should just take a closer look at that as well.
Okay.
So I withhold a yes or no on that until then.
Okay. Okay, so that'll be an issue that we look at before the next meeting, and perhaps the answer can be found in notes from prior meetings. Anybody else from the commission with any comments, questions, or concerns regarding anything on the calendar for today? Okay, if not, then what we'll do is we'll set another meeting for us to accept public testimony on House Bill 5959, probably as is right now, so that it's easy for people, the general public, to access and review, but certainly keeping in mind any suggestions that the commission has made or commission members have made moving forward for that meeting, and then a third meeting to publish or vote on recommendations with respect to the draft commission report. So I think probably the easiest thing to do from a housekeeping perspective is to coordinate the next meeting via email, as this one does. It will, I'm almost positive it'll have to be a WebEx meeting, and we'll probably try and do it within the next 2 or 3 weeks if we can get the available space in Capital TV time. So we'll try and coordinate that within the next couple of days, and then post House Bill 5959 for discussion and consideration and public testimony, and then we'll see what the committee's recommendations are after hearing testimony, and then come back and vote on a final draft, hopefully before the end of June, because otherwise I believe that the commission's life would have to be extended for a third time in order to allow us to continue to meet. So with that said, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All right, we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much.